The personnel file slammed against the conference table. Walter Sterling stood at the head of the room, holding it up like a trophy, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. Are we really paying this girl to look at codes? He let the words hang there, making sure every executive in that room heard him clearly. $800,000 a year, to sit in an office and stare at spreadsheets. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I kept my hands flat on the table, willing them not to shake. This was my execution, and Walter was enjoying every second of it. I've been here 3 weeks, he continued, pacing now like a prosecutor making closing arguments. 3 weeks, and I can already identify the inefficiencies bleeding this company dry. This position, Senior Compliance Analyst? He said my title like it was a punchline. This is exactly the kind of bloated role that looks good on paper, but delivers zero measurable value. I'm Lisa Harmon. I'd spent 6 years at Hexagon Financial catching the mistakes that would have buried this company. 6 years of reading contracts until my eyes burned, finding the clauses everyone else missed, flagging the deals that looked golden but were actually landmines. And Walter Sterling, who'd been here barely long enough to learn where the bathrooms were, was reducing my entire career to looking at codes. Lisa here makes more than some of our department heads, Walter said, warming to his audience. Martin Cross, our CFO, was watching carefully. Sharon, my boss, looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. And what's her output? Reports nobody reads. Emails about theoretical problems. Warnings about disasters that somehow never actually happen. Sharon tried to cut in. Walter, if you look at Lisa's actual track record over the past 6 years. He waved her off like she was a mosquito. I've reviewed the track record. Lots of activity. Lots of busy work. What I don't see is concrete ROI. What I don't see is a single catastrophe she's actually prevented because those catastrophes she's always warning about. They never materialize, maybe because they were never real in the first place. That's when I snapped. I'd been up since 4 that morning finishing my analysis of the Quantum Ridge Holdings acquisition. My daughter Tara had been sick with a fever for 3 days. My son Luke needed help preparing for his debate tournament. My husband Carl was holding our family together with duct tape and prayer while I worked 16-hour days. And I was done being diplomatic. Section 12, subsection 4 of the Quantum Ridge acquisition, I said. My voice cut through the room, steady and cold. The earnout structure directly contradicts the indemnification language. If we close this deal tomorrow as planned, we're exposed to liability that could exceed $2 billion. Walter's grin got wider. He actually looked delighted. $2 billion. Everyone hear that? $2 billion. Let me get this straight, Lisa. You're telling me that our legal team missed this problem, that the 3 external advisory firms we paid millions to review this deal missed it. That Quantum Ridge's own attorneys missed it. But you, sitting in your office with your highlighters and your spreadsheets, you found the smoking gun nobody else could see. Yes. The single word landed like a challenge. Walter laughed, and a few people around the table shifted uncomfortably. Martin leaned forward, interested despite himself. What's the specific exposure, Lisa? I'd been waiting for someone to actually ask. I pulled up my laptop, calling up the analysis I'd sent to the deal team 3 times already. Quantum Ridge's revenue reporting methodology doesn't align with their actual contract structure. They're classifying one-time project fees as recurring subscription revenue to inflate their growth metrics. When we reconcile their books post-acquisition using standard accounting principles, their earnout performance triggers will fail. The indemnification clause as currently written allows them to claim we deliberately sabotaged their operations to avoid the earnout payout. The earnout is structured at $400 million over 3 years. Factor in consequential damages for lost shareholder value, and we're looking at $2 billion minimum. The room went silent. For about 5 seconds, I thought maybe someone would actually listen. Then Walter shook his head, smiling like I was a child insisting monsters lived in the closet. This is exactly the problem. Theoretical catastrophes, hypothetical scenarios built on assumptions and worst-case thinking. He turned to Martin. When does Quantum Ridge close? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. And have their lawyers raised any red flags about this Section 12 issue? Martin glanced at me, then back at Walter. No, they haven't. Right, because it's not actually a problem. It's Lisa finding patterns in the wallpaper. Walter closed my personnel file with a decisive snap. Here's what's happening. Quantum Ridge closes tomorrow as planned. This deal has been 6 months in the making, and we're not blowing it up because of theoretical concerns. He turned those cold eyes on me. And Lisa, you're taking some paid leave. 2 weeks. Effective immediately. Rest up. Think about whether this role is really the right fit for your talents. Paid leave. The words might as well have been "you're fired," we're just being polite about it. Everyone in that room knew the script. Paid leave, then a performance improvement plan, then a generous exit package and a non-disclosure agreement. Sharon tried one last time. Walter, I really think we should at least have Lisa present her full analysis. Meeting's over. Walter was already gathering his materials. We've got a transformational acquisition closing in the morning. Let's stay focused on what actually moves this company forward. I walked out of that conference room knowing 3 things with absolute certainty. First, my career at Hexagon was finished. Second, Walter Sterling was going to close the Quantum Ridge deal despite my warnings. And third, when that deal exploded exactly the way I'd predicted, they were going to need someone to blame. I went back to my office and stared at the Quantum Ridge documents still glowing on my screen. All that conflicting language highlighted in yellow. The revenue discrepancies I'd flagged in red. The mathematical certainty of disaster spelled out in my analysis. Sharon appeared in my doorway 10 minutes later. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past hour. I'm so sorry, Lisa. You tried, I appreciate it. He's been building a case against you since his first week. High-cost position, difficult to quantify output on a spreadsheet. You were always going to be his first target. She closed the door and sat down. What are you going to do? I was already opening a new email. I'm going to document exactly what I found, exactly when I found it, and exactly what I recommended. Then I'm going to send it to everyone who needs to see it. Will that help? It'll create a paper trail. When this deal goes sideways, at least there'll be proof I saw it coming. The email took me 2 hours to write. Every word mattered. I couldn't sound emotional, couldn't sound like I was trying to sabotage the deal out of spite. I had to be clinical, factual, professional. Section references, risk analysis, dollar exposure calculations, timeline of when I'd flagged these issues. Recommended action, which was simple and clear. Delay closing by 72 hours and have independent counsel review the specific language conflicts. I sent it to Martin Cross, copied Walter Sterling, Sharon, and Hexagon's General Counsel Philip Strauss. Then I sat there staring at the sent confirmation, knowing it wouldn't change anything. Walter's response came 18 minutes later. 2 sentences that would eventually cost him his career. Noted, closing proceeds as scheduled. I forwarded the entire email chain to my personal account. Then I forwarded every other email I'd sent about Quantum Ridge over the past 6 weeks. Every warning, every analysis, every flag I'd raised. 14 documents total, all time-stamped, all showing I'd been screaming about this problem while everyone else covered their ears. My phone buzzed, Carl calling. How did it go? His voice was hopeful. He knew I'd been preparing for this meeting all week. I'll tell you when I get home. Lisa, what happened? Paid leave, 2 weeks. He's setting up for termination. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm sorry, come home, we'll figure this out. But I couldn't sleep that night. I kept running through the Quantum Ridge documents in my mind, checking my math, questioning my analysis. What if I was wrong? What if this was the one time I'd seen patterns that didn't exist? Maybe that's why Walter saw me as expendable. Maybe I'd become the analyst who cried wolf. At 2 a.m, I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, rechecking the revenue classification discrepancies for the 40th time. The numbers didn't lie. Quantum Ridge was misrepresenting their financials. The earnout was going to fail. The indemnification language was going to crush Hexagon. Carl found me there, eyes red from staring at the screen. You've checked this how many times? I don't know anymore, a lot. And every single time, what did you find? The same problem. He pulled up a chair next to me. Then you did your job, you warned them, you documented it. Whatever happens now, that's on them, not you. But it didn't feel that way. When you're good at what you do, the responsibility doesn't end just because someone else makes the final call. The next morning, I didn't go into the office. My forced leave had started, which meant I wasn't supposed to check my work email. I checked it anyway. At 7:45, I started refreshing my inbox obsessively. 8:17 a.m., the company-wide announcement hit. Hexagon Financial is pleased to announce the successful closing of our acquisition of Quantum Ridge Holdings. This transformative deal positions us at the forefront of data analytics and financial technology integration. The deal was done. The countdown had started. Carl made breakfast. Luke asked why I was home on a weekday. Tara wanted me to read to her. I went through the motions, but my mind was calculating timelines. It would take at least 2 weeks for Hexagon's finance team to start the serious integration work. Another week or two before they'd try to reconcile Quantum Ridge's revenue reporting with standard accounting practices. Maybe a month before the discrepancies became undeniable. Maybe 2 months before Quantum Ridge's lawyers started making noise about the earnout. I had time to update my resume, time to start looking for my next position, time to pretend this wasn't eating me alive. By day 2 of my forced leave, I'd made my decision. I called Sharon at 9 in the morning. I'm resigning. Dead silence. Then, Lisa, no, don't do anything rash. You're on paid leave. You're still getting your salary. Just ride it out for 2 weeks and we'll figure out what comes next. I know what comes next. Walter fires me and controls the narrative. He makes it look like I was terminated for cause, for being difficult, for not being a team player. I become the analyst who couldn't adapt to new leadership. I'd been thinking about this all night. He's going to fire me anyway, Sharon. You know it, I know it. This way I leave on my terms, with my resignation letter saying exactly what I want it to say. What about your salary, your benefits? Lisa, you've got 2 kids and a mortgage. I've also got documentation that I warned this company about a multi-billion-dollar disaster and was completely ignored. When Quantum Ridge blows up, that documentation is worth more than 2 weeks of salary. Sharon was quiet for a long moment. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. I wrote the resignation email that afternoon. It took me an hour to get the tone right. Professional, cordial, brief. Effective immediately, I'm resigning from my position as Senior Compliance Analyst. Thank you for the opportunities over the past 6 years. I wish Hexagon continued success. I sent it to HR, copied Sharon and Martin Cross. I deliberately didn't copy Walter Sterling. Let him find out through the grapevine. Let him think he'd won. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called an employment lawyer. Her name was Simone Pacheco, and she came highly recommended by a recruiter I'd worked with before. I got her assistant first, explained I needed urgent consultation. Somehow they fit me in for a call at 3 that afternoon. Tell me everything, Simone said when we connected. I walked her through the whole story, the Quantum Ridge acquisition, the clause conflict I'd identified, the revenue reporting discrepancies, Walter's dismissal of my warnings, the forced paid leave, my resignation that morning. When I finished, Simone was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Do you have documentation of your warnings? Every email, every analysis, every risk assessment, all time-stamped, all sent to the appropriate people. And their responses. Walter's response to my final warning was 2 sentences. Noted, closing proceeds as scheduled. I heard her exhale. Lisa, you just made the smartest decision of your career by resigning. If this situation develops the way you think it will, Hexagon's going to be desperate to assign blame. As a current employee, you'd be vulnerable. As a former employee with bulletproof documentation that you identified and properly escalated the risk, you're protected. More than that, you're valuable. Valuable how? When the disaster hits, they're going to need your expertise to dig themselves out. And when they come calling, and they will come calling, we're going to make sure you're properly compensated and completely indemnified from any liability. You sound very confident this is going to blow up. You sound very confident in your analysis. Are you wrong? I thought about those numbers, those clauses, that mathematical certainty I'd been living with for weeks. No, I'm not wrong. Then we prepare. Forward me every document you have related to Quantum Ridge. Every email, every analysis, every presentation. I want timestamps on everything. We're going to build a file that makes it crystal clear you did everything right. I spent the next 4 hours forwarding documents to Simone. When I was done, I had a folder with 23 files, every warning, every flag, every recommendation. A complete paper trail of competence ignored. Simone called me back that evening. This is excellent documentation. You've protected yourself beautifully. Now we wait. Carl wasn't entirely on board with my resignation. We needed that income. I know, but I couldn't sit there on forced leave waiting for the axe to fall. I'll find something else. The market's good for senior compliance analysts right now. I'd already had 2 recruiters reach out based on my LinkedIn activity. He pulled me close. I trust you. I just don't want these people to hurt you any more than they already have. Too late for that, but I can control what happens next. The first week after my resignation was surreal. I actually showed up to Luke's debate practice. I took Tara to a follow-up doctor's appointment without rescheduling 3 times. I cooked dinner every night. Carl kept saying I seemed lighter, less stressed. But underneath everything, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where doing the right thing sometimes means standing completely alone. If you're invested in how this plays out, subscribe and help us reach 9,000 subscribers. Sharon called me on day 8 after my resignation. How are you holding up? Better than expected. Sleeping more, actually seeing my kids. How's everything there? Tense, Walter's on a rampage with his efficiency initiatives. He eliminated 3 more positions this week, all high-salary roles. He's making a name for himself as the guy who cuts costs. She paused. He hasn't mentioned your resignation once. It's like you never existed. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. 6 years of excellent work, erased in 3 weeks by a new executive with something to prove. Has anything come up with the Quantum Ridge integration? I asked, knowing I shouldn't. Lisa, you don't work here anymore. You really shouldn't be thinking about this. Sharon, please. She sighed. Integration starts next week. Finance is beginning the preliminary reconciliation work. Everything looks fine so far, but it's early. So far, those were the operative words. The bomb was still ticking, countdown invisible but inevitable. I updated my resume that week. It felt like defeat, but it was also practical. I talked to 3 different recruiters. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Senior compliance analysts with your track record are in massive demand right now, one told me enthusiastically. Especially with experience in large-scale acquisitions. You could probably command 900,000, maybe push for $1 million at the right firm. The numbers should have excited me. They felt empty. I had interviews lined up with 2 different firms. Both seemed promising. Both were interested in my experience preventing deal disasters. I didn't mention that my most recent attempt at preventing disaster had gotten me laughed out of a conference room. On the Saturday that marked exactly 2 weeks since the Quantum Ridge closing, my phone rang at 8 in the morning. Sharon. Her voice was shaking so badly I almost couldn't understand her. Lisa, oh my God, you were right. You were completely right about everything. My heart started pounding. I walked out of the kitchen where Carl was making pancakes with the kids. Tell me what happened. Quantum Ridge's quarterly financial reports came in yesterday. The revenue recognition issue you flagged? It's catastrophic. They've been systematically misclassifying contract revenue for 18 months. One-time project fees categorized as recurring subscriptions. Implementation charges listed as ongoing service revenue. When our finance team started applying standard accounting practices for the integration, nothing reconciled. We're talking about hundreds of millions in revenue that doesn't actually exist the way they reported it. I sat down on the couch, legs suddenly weak. What about the earn-out clause? Sharon's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Their lawyers sent a formal demand letter this morning. They're claiming we deliberately interfered with their operations during the integration transition, which caused the revenue discrepancies to surface and destroyed their earnout value. They're citing the exact indemnification language you referenced. Lisa, they're demanding $2.1 billion in damages. $2.1 billion, the number I'd calculated, the nightmare scenario I'd warned about, the disaster everyone had ignored. Where's Walter right now? Emergency board meeting, started at 6 this morning. Martin's in there, Philip from legal, outside counsel. Everyone's trying to figure out how this happened and how we fight it. Has my name come up? Sharon hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicions. Martin asked if anyone had flagged concerns about the deal structure before closing. Walter tried to downplay it, said you were always finding theoretical problems that never panned out, but Martin pushed back. He remembered your email. He asked to see the documentation. There's plenty of documentation. I know. Lisa, listen to me. Walter's going to try to spin this. He's going to try to make it seem like your warnings were vague or incomplete or not properly escalated. The board is asking hard questions about why this deal closed if there were identified risks. Walter's under serious pressure. You need to be ready. I have a lawyer. Good, don't talk to anyone from Hexagon without her present. Don't respond to any emails. Don't take any calls. Because if they're looking for someone to blame, they'll come after you. I called Simone immediately. She answered on the second ring, even though it was Saturday morning. It happened, I said. Quantum Ridge, everything I predicted. They're claiming $2.1 billion. Send me any communications you receive from Hexagon. Every email, every voicemail, every text message. Don't respond to anything without my explicit approval. By Monday morning, my inbox was flooded. Martin Cross trying to reach me. Philip Strauss from legal wanting to schedule a call. Someone from HR with a vague subject line about consulting opportunities. Even Walter sent an email. Need to discuss Quantum Ridge matter urgently. I forwarded every single message to Simone and didn't respond to any of them. Tuesday afternoon, Simone called with an update. I just spent 90 minutes on the phone with Philip Strauss. Hexagon wants to bring you back. As what, a scapegoat? As a consultant. They need your expertise to build their defense against Quantum Ridge's claim. You know the deal structure better than anyone. You identified the issues before closing. You understand the revenue discrepancies. They need you to walk their legal team through everything so they can mount an effective defense. The irony was almost funny. 2 weeks ago, Walter was mocking my salary and pushing me out. Now they want my help. Now they're desperate. And here's what makes this interesting. The board is asking pointed questions about the decision-making process. Why did this deal close despite identified risks? Who made that final call? Walter's feeling heat from above. Before we even consider you helping them, we need terms that protect you completely and make your role in this situation absolutely clear. What kind of terms? Full indemnification from any liability related to Quantum Ridge. An independent consulting rate that reflects your actual value. I'm thinking $15,000 per day. And most importantly, any official response to Quantum Ridge's claim must include a detailed timeline establishing that you identified these risks, properly escalated your concerns, and were overruled. You're not the person who caused this disaster. You're the person who tried to prevent it. That needs to be documented in writing and included in their legal response. Over the next 5 days, Simone negotiated with Hexagon's legal team. Every term I'd outlined. Every protection I needed. Every piece of the narrative that established my warnings and their decision to ignore those warnings. They agreed to everything. They had no choice. They were staring down a $2 billion claim, and I was the only person who understood the full scope of the problem. Carl wasn't sure it was the right move. You could just walk away, take one of those other job offers, let them clean up their own mess. I could, I admitted, but $2 billion doesn't just hurt Walter Sterling. It hurts every single person who works at Hexagon. Sharon, Martin, the analysts and assistants and operations people who had nothing to do with ignoring my warnings. If I can help limit the damage, shouldn't I? He studied my face for a long moment. You're better than they deserve. Maybe, but this isn't about what they deserve. It's about doing what's right. and making absolutely certain that everyone knows I was right from the beginning. I walked back into Hexagon's offices on a Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks after Walter Sterling had laughed at my salary and questioned my value. The atmosphere was completely different. Quiet, tense, afraid. Everyone knew about the Quantum Ridge claim by now. Everyone knew the company was facing potential catastrophe. Philip Strauss met me in the lobby personally. He was mid-50s, gray hair, deep circles under his eyes. "Lisa, thank you for agreeing to help us. Where do we start?" "Conference room A. We have the full deal team assembled plus outside counsel from Morrison and Fletcher. We need you to walk everyone through your analysis." The conference room was packed. Martin Cross looking exhausted. Sharon giving me a small, grateful smile. 3 lawyers I didn't recognize in expensive suits. And Walter Sterling, sitting at the far end of the table, staring at his notepad like it held the secrets of the universe. Philip opened the meeting with practiced efficiency. "Everyone here understands our situation. Quantum Ridge Holdings is alleging that Hexagon deliberately interfered with their post-acquisition operations, causing their earnout performance metrics to fail. They're claiming $2.1 billion in damages under the indemnification clause. We have 60 days to file our response before this proceeds to formal litigation." He gestured toward me. Lisa Harmon identified significant issues with the earnout structure and indemnification language prior to closing. We need to understand exactly what she found when she found it and how that information was communicated. Every eye in the room turned to me. Walter still wouldn't look up from his notepad. I opened my laptop and pulled up the analysis I'd prepared. I'll start with the complete timeline. For the next 2.5 hours, I walked them through everything with surgical precision. The initial contract review where I'd first noticed the problematic language in Section 12. The deep dive into Quantum Ridge's historical financial filings that revealed inconsistencies in their revenue recognition methodology. The conflicting structure between earnout performance triggers and indemnification liability allocation. The 3 separate emails I'd sent to the deal team flagging these concerns. The formal risk assessment presentation I delivered 4 weeks before closing. And finally, my last comprehensive email sent 18 hours before closing, laying out the potential exposure in exact detail. One of the outside lawyers, a sharp-eyed woman named Roxanne Ellis, stopped me. "This final email you sent the day before closing, who received it and who responded?" I sent it to Martin Cross, copied Walter Sterling, Sharon Reeves, and Philip Strauss. Walter Sterling responded. Roxanne turned her attention to Walter. "Mr. Sterling, what was the nature of your response?" Walter's voice was flat, stripped of all the confidence he'd had in that conference room 3 weeks ago. "I acknowledged receipt of Lisa's concerns and made the determination that closing should proceed as scheduled." "On what basis did you make that determination?" The silence stretched out for several seconds. Roxanne pressed forward. "Did you consult with additional legal counsel specifically about the issues Lisa raised? Did you have another senior analyst independently verify her findings? Did you conduct any supplementary due diligence on the revenue recognition concerns?" I relied on the work product from the outside counsel and advisory firms who had already reviewed the deal documentation. "Did you specifically ask any of those outside parties to review and address the concerns Lisa had identified?" Walter's jaw tightened. "No, I did not." Roxanne made a careful note. "Why not?" I made a judgment call that the concerns were theoretical, and that further delay wasn't warranted given the time and resources already invested in the deal. Roxanne turned back to me. "Lisa, in your professional opinion based on 6 years of acquisition compliance analysis, was the risk you identified readily discoverable during standard due diligence?" I looked directly at Walter for the first time. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. "Yes. It required detailed cross-referencing of contract language with actual revenue reporting methodology, but it was absolutely discoverable with appropriate analysis." "And in your professional opinion, should this acquisition have closed with the identified language conflicts in place?" "No, the risk exposure was too significant. At minimum, closing should have been delayed until the conflicting language could be reconciled, and the revenue recognition methodology could be independently verified against historical performance. Thank you, Lisa. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes, but the critical narrative had been established. I had done my job. I had identified the risk. I had escalated appropriately through proper channels. The decision to override those warnings and close the deal anyway sat entirely with Walter Sterling. When the meeting finally ended, people filed out in subdued silence. Walter left first, head down, not speaking to anyone. Sharon caught my arm in the hallway. That was brutal to watch. That was factual documentation of what actually happened. There's already talk about major layoffs. If we can't settle this claim or get it significantly reduced. She didn't need to finish the sentence. $2 billion would destroy Hexagon completely. Over the following 10 weeks, I became Hexagon's most critical asset. I worked closely with Roxanne and the Morrison and Fletcher legal team to construct a comprehensive defense strategy. The core argument was elegantly simple. Quantum Ridge had fundamentally misrepresented their financial position from the very beginning of acquisition discussions. The earnout failure wasn't the result of any action Hexagon had taken post-acquisition. It was the inevitable result of Quantum Ridge's pre-acquisition financials being built on aggressive accounting practices that couldn't survive standard reconciliation. To prove that thesis, we had to reconstruct Quantum Ridge's entire revenue history from the ground up. I spent weeks analyzing every contract they'd executed over the past 3 years, every customer agreement, every revenue recognition policy, every financial statement. The deeper I dug, the worse it looked for Quantum Ridge. They hadn't just been careless with their accounting. They'd been systematically aggressive, deliberately reclassifying revenue types to create the appearance of predictable recurring revenue growth. One-time project fees became subscription revenue. Implementation charges became ongoing services. Contract modifications became expansions that inflated growth metrics. When Hexagon's finance team had begun applying generally accepted accounting principles during integration, the house of cards collapsed. The real numbers told a completely different story. Quantum Ridge was worth perhaps 60% of what Hexagon had paid. Roxanne used my exhaustive analysis to completely flip the narrative. Hexagon wasn't the party in breach of the acquisition agreement. Quantum Ridge was. They had committed fraud in the inducement by systematically misrepresenting their financial performance to inflate the acquisition price. The earnout failure was a direct, inevitable consequence of that underlying fraud. Hexagon filed their formal response in mid-December, along with a substantial counterclaim for fraudulent inducement, breach of contract, and breach of representations and warranties. The reaction from Quantum Ridge was swift and telling. Within 6 days, their counsel reached out to discuss potential settlement. The settlement negotiations took nearly 2 months, but the final agreement came together in late February. Quantum Ridge completely withdrew their $2.1 billion claim. Hexagon agreed to a restructured earnout with dramatically lower performance targets that actually reflected Quantum Ridge's legitimate revenue potential. No additional money changed hands beyond the original acquisition price. Both parties agreed to strict confidentiality terms. It wasn't a total victory, but it was close enough. Hexagon survived, barely. Walter Sterling's resignation was announced in early March. The carefully worded board statement mentioned pursuing other opportunities and mutual agreement. Everyone who could read between corporate lines knew exactly what had happened. Philip Strauss called me into his office the morning after Walter's resignation became public. "We want you to come back permanently," he said without preamble. "Senior Vice President of Risk Management and Compliance. You'd have oversight authority for all major deal analysis, all acquisition due diligence, all compliance review for significant transactions. Direct reporting line to me and the board. $1.2 million salary plus substantial equity stake." It was more money than I'd ever imagined earning. It was the recognition I'd wanted for my entire career. It was validation that my expertise mattered. I thought about the offer for maybe 15 seconds. No, but thank you. Philip actually looked shocked. No, Lisa, this is a significant opportunity. I appreciate that, but I've already accepted a position elsewhere. Catalyst Partners had contacted me back in January. They were a boutique consulting firm specializing in acquisition risk assessment for mid-market and large-cap transactions. They'd heard about my role in the Quantum Ridge situation through industry connections. They wanted me to do exactly what I'd just done for Hexagon, but for multiple clients across different industries, on my own terms with my own team. The base salary was actually lower than Hexagon's offer, $900,000, but the equity stake was substantial, and the partnership track was clear. More importantly, I'd never have to sit through another meeting where someone like Walter Sterling dismissed my expertise as theoretical concerns. My final day as a Hexagon consultant was a Friday in late March. Sharon took me to lunch at the Italian place we'd always talked about trying but never had time for. "You're really leaving us," she said over pasta. "I am. We're going to miss you tremendously. I'm going to miss you." "You could come with me. Catalyst is expanding rapidly. They're actively looking for experienced analysts." Sharon smiled but shook her head. "Maybe eventually. Let me see how things evolve here with new leadership. With Walter gone, there's a chance we can rebuild something functional." We both understood that was optimistic thinking, but hope counted for something. That night, Carl opened a good bottle of wine after Luke and Tara were asleep. To my brilliant wife, who saved a company that absolutely didn't deserve her. I didn't save them. I just did the job they should have let me do in the first place. You did more than that. You stood your ground when everyone said you were wrong. You protected yourself when they would have made you a scapegoat. You came through this stronger and on your own terms. We touched glasses and drank. The truth was, I didn't feel particularly strong. I felt tired, relieved, grateful it was over, but also angry. Angry that it had taken a near-catastrophic disaster for people to listen. Angry that Walter had faced minimal real consequences beyond a resignation that probably came with a generous severance package. Angry that hundreds of people had nearly lost their jobs because one executive couldn't admit he didn't understand something. But that anger was useful fuel. It reminded me exactly why this work mattered so much. Someone has to be the person in the room willing to say, "Stop. Look at this. Think about what we're actually doing." Someone has to read the fine print that everyone else finds boring. Someone has to run the numbers that seem tedious until they prevent disaster. Someone has to care about the details everyone else wants to dismiss. And when that someone gets laughed at, dismissed, sidelined, or pushed out, they have to be strong enough and prepared enough to stand by their work regardless. 3 months into my new position at Catalyst Partners, I was conducting acquisition review for a healthcare technology company. Buried deep in regulatory compliance filings, I identified a potential Medicare reimbursement issue that could have triggered federal penalties and clawback provisions worth tens of millions. I flagged it immediately. The client's CEO pushed back hard, insisting his legal team had thoroughly cleared all regulatory concerns. I stood my ground, documented my analysis in detail, laid out the regulatory risk with supporting citations and precedent. The CEO delayed the transaction, brought in specialized healthcare regulatory counsel. Within a week, they confirmed I was absolutely right. Again. This time, there was no laughing, no dismissal, just genuine gratitude and a request for Catalyst to handle all their future deal analysis. That's the essential truth about being genuinely excellent at what you do. Eventually, the right people notice. Eventually, the right people listen. Eventually, the right people value your expertise appropriately. And the Walter Sterlings of the world become cautionary tales people tell to illustrate what not to do. I still think about that morning sometimes. Walter holding my personnel file like a weapon, the sound of his condescending laugh echoing in the conference room, the way my hands trembled under the table while I fought to keep my voice steady. I think about how close I came to staying silent, to accepting his assessment of my value, to believing that maybe I really was overpaid and underperforming. I think about the $2.1 billion catastrophe that almost destroyed an entire company. And I'm grateful. Grateful I trusted my own expertise even when everyone else dismissed it. Grateful I documented everything with obsessive precision. Grateful I had people like Carl and Sharon and Simone in my corner. Grateful that I resigned on my own terms before they could control the narrative. Grateful that when the disaster hit exactly as predicted, I was positioned to help rather than be blamed. Because that's the real payback, not revenge, not watching someone who wronged you fail spectacularly, but knowing with absolute certainty that you did the right thing, the hard thing, the professional thing, even when nobody wanted to hear it, even when it cost you in the short term. And then, when the dust settles and the numbers come in and the truth becomes undeniable, you get to stand there knowing you were right all along. That feeling is worth more than any salary number, even $800,000, especially when the alternative is a $2 billion disaster that you saw coming from miles away and tried desperately to prevent. If you've stayed with this story until the end, you understand why these situations matter. Real expertise dismissed, real consequences ignored, real vindication earned. Hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories like this that need to be told. The best epilogue came about 6 months into my role at Catalyst Partners. I received a LinkedIn message from Martin Cross. He'd left Hexagon as well. He was doing independent consulting now, advising corporate boards on risk management governance and acquisition oversight. His message was short but meaningful. I should have listened to you in that conference room. I should have backed you up against Walter. I'm genuinely sorry I didn't. What you did took real courage, and I learned from watching how you handled it. I wrote back, you listened when it actually mattered. You pushed for the documentation. You made sure the truth came out. That's what counts. Because in the end, that's all any of us can really do. Listen when it counts most. Speak up when it matters, regardless of consequences. Stand by our work when everyone else is running away. Document everything so truth has a foundation to stand on. And trust that eventually, with enough patience and enough integrity and enough competence, the truth does win. It cost $2.1 billion in claimed damages to prove I was right. But I would have been right at any price. The morning after I sent my resignation to Hexagon, Carl had asked me if I was sure about walking away. You're giving up a lot, he'd said. The salary, the security, the position you built over 6 years. I'd thought about it carefully before answering. I'm not giving up anything real. I'm protecting something more important, my professional integrity, my expertise, my right to be heard when I identify genuine problems. Those things matter more than any job title. He'd nodded, understanding even though it scared him. So what happens next? Next, I make sure that when this disaster happens, and it will happen, I'm positioned to help fix it rather than be blamed for it. Next, I make sure my documentation is airtight. Next, I make sure everyone knows I did everything right. And after that, I find people who actually value what I do. And I never again work somewhere that I have to convince people my expertise matters. That conversation felt like a lifetime ago now, even though it had been less than a year. I'd kept every promise I made to myself that morning. I'd protected my integrity. I'd documented everything. I'd positioned myself perfectly. I'd found an organization that valued my expertise from day one. And Walter Sterling, wherever he'd landed after his resignation, had learned an expensive lesson about the difference between cost and value. About the danger of dismissing expertise you don't understand. About the catastrophic consequences of arrogance masquerading as leadership. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall, but I took profound satisfaction in knowing that my work, my analysis, my warnings had been vindicated completely. Sometimes being right isn't enough. You also have to be brave enough to say it, document it, stand by it, and protect yourself when others refuse to listen. I'd done all of that. And I'd do it again tomorrow if I had to. Because that's what real expertise looks like. Not just knowing the answer, but having the courage to speak it, the wisdom to document it, and the strength to stand by it when everyone else is laughing. That's the lesson Walter Sterling learned too late. That's the lesson I'll carry forward for the rest of my career. And that's the story of how $800,000 in salary almost cost a company $2 billion because someone couldn't tell the difference between looking at codes and preventing catastrophes.